Somewhere right now is a 30-something-year-old living in a dark, dingy basement. Probably their parents, surrounded by empty energy drinks, beer cans, and other adult paraphernalia. They're isolated from friends, family, the entire world. They are spiraling into an abyss they can't crawl out of, going further into an inescapable madness. This may sound like your average Reddit user, detached from a community of people in real life. They need somewhere to share what's on their mind. And while I'm sure plenty of them exist there, some people need to take it further than Reddit. They just have too much to say, too many thoughts on their mind, and too many of them way more explicit than even Reddit can handle. Welcome to Free World Alliance. When first opening, it's like a tsunami of flashing colors that will either hypnotize you or give you a headache. It gave me the latter. In big, bright, bold letters, the words Free World Alliance cover almost the entire page, as well as a logo for whatever that is. It seems vague and doesn't give any impressions of anything wrong or creepy, but just a quick scroll down and whatever you thought Free World Alliance meant quickly disappears. What was already a wall of colors and shapes becomes even more chaotic as the page is packed to the brim with what looks like one long run-on sentence that someone vomited into a journal. But instead of a private notebook, they bought a domain and made it available for anyone to see. That is, if you can read it. The moving rainbows are still flashing in the background, and the wall of text being written in white doesn't make it any easier to read. Once I can make out what it says, I quickly realize that it makes no sense. But besides that, the language is vile. I can't share a lot of it because it's honestly too explicit, but some lines that aren't so terrible and worth sharing are: Americans are all maggot-ridden freaks since they are born. Within days to weeks to months, degenerate into total zombies. Or, a toddler keeps their fingers and toe muscles and has to be put in a rubber toddler suit, with everything else being the same as the babies. And that's just half of it. A lot of it is very intimate in nature, especially about women. There's no clear message or point, but it's all very objectifying and just gross. And then along with that is a lot of talk about babies, but obviously not in a cute or wholesome way, but rather about how they're zombies, that they need to be hurt or changed in some ways. The whole thing is creepy as hell, and it only gets worse. The more I look at it, the more this world opens up. I see the same type of language that pops up, and a lot of words are repeated over and over again, like they talk a lot about pixies, lure girls, zombies, and denizens. It's like they're creating their own fantasy world with mythical creatures that they've created. But there's nothing whimsical about this. It just gets alarmingly more deranged. Not surprisingly, a lot of it revolves around extreme conspiracy theories, like the Illuminati. But even with the parts on that, it goes beyond what an average conspiracy theorist believes in. On one page it says, Supreme Magic Spellbook first in both text and pictures. For magic, magic book, Scientology, and Illuminati not even showing up at all. Even if you're lying about it, Google, you shouldn't be lying about it even if you think it's going to help. It's not. All it causes is dyskinesia and disconnection from reality. Stop helping them produce zombies like the news always does. I mean, that's just light work for Free World Alliance. Moving on from the rambling gibberish on the Illuminati, the government, and zombies, there's also multiple sections that include images of German hate symbols with headers above it that say, Flag of the Free World Alliance. It does look like the symbol is flipped and not the original symbol that the Germans used, but that doesn't really decrease how disturbing it is, especially when I scroll down a little more and see multiple sections where they've uploaded pictures of state laws on intimacy between an adult and someone who is not an adult. Their commentary on that is pure anger. I can't even say what they wrote because they mentioned the word that sounds like grape probably 10 times in just one paragraph. But basically, they're extremely upset that it's illegal to engage in that. And that's just one section. I searched up that word and it comes up 45 times on that site. And each piece with it just gets more offensive than the last. Now, clearly, whoever created the Free World Alliance is much less than stable. I'm sure there's mental illness behind it, especially with how much of it is just rambling with no beginning and end. But how much of the disgusting and depraved language can be excused because of that? Because not only is it horrifying, there's just so much of it. At one point on the site, they list at least 100 if not more websites listed, each one with descriptions of what they are and who they'd be useful towards. Each one is created by the same person. Some examples are Magic Guild, for people who want to be blacksmiths as well as already being a pirate. 9/11 Conspiracy Theory, for 9/11 conspiracy theorists. Society of Wizards, for complete and utter perverts. Tell her she has to read through the whole thing to understand how good it is. That is just 3 of many. And each single one is just as long as the first one I came across. Tens of thousands of words of either complete nonsense or misogynistic, violent, and downright terrifying rambling. Like I started this story with, this person has to be unemployed and most likely living in their mother's basement. There's no way someone who works full-time would have enough time on their hands to do all of this. My theory is correct based on a couple things I found on the website, such as, I am still supported by my parents though. Kill any who think I should and not be able to accept donations, or the bank will take all your money away. And Scientologists will kick you out of your house. But digging deeper into this, I was able to find out more information than just that. More details on who is behind the Free World Alliance and its insanity. In the section where they go into each website, one line says, "For parts of my life story, Pinnacle of the Dragon data." Upon clicking that link, I'm brought to a site where I'm first met with a huge star-shaped symbol that is recurring on the other sites as well. Below that it says, Pinnacle of the Draco data. Pindar is Allah Erawa Viakad. I'm not sure if he's referring to the ancient Greek poet when he says Pindar, but obviously, whoever this is not him. What is true though is that Allah Erawa Viakad is whoever is behind all of this. Of course, it's most likely that's a pseudonym for him. I find it very unlikely that's what's written on his birth certificate. But what does seem likely is that the picture below this one is taken of himself. Along with the photo, he gives a long list of descriptions of himself, such as personality, always likes to be supreme, but will always stand corrected honestly and maintain power, referencing past successes and, if necessary, future prophecy and eternal angelic expectations of Allah's eternal power, which was never really contested by pixies or archangels. Again, nothing is really making sense. That doesn't give me an accurate picture of who he is, other than most likely suffering from a mental illness, which is not breaking news. But scroll down a little more, and something shifts. There's a change. It's subtle, but it's there. Under a header that says, "A short story about me, Allah," there's a long, extensive couple of paragraphs. But this time, it's coherent, and it actually makes sense. We can actually get an idea of who this is. It reads, in fall 2003, when I was a freshman in college, actually born April 1st, 1985 AD, I did not believe in any of this conspiracy nonsense until I was near the end of an infamous video game called Deus Ex. There, the primary characters, explain how the 20th century was ruled by corporations, governments, and international organizations. I thought deeply on these lines, realizing that if one organization had control of enough power, then it would be able to effectively rule the world in secret. I first looked up Majestic 12 Conspiracy, the faction in the game with the most power. I found only links to Deus Ex. However, when I looked up Illuminati Conspiracy, I felt sick to my stomach because of how many links it brought up on Google. That is when my search for truth about the world around me began. I became a conspiracy theorist addict, but I wasn't quite sure if it was real. I began to follow links to websites with luminous knowledge. Alice Bailey began to convert me into Luciferianism as I read about how the snake in the Garden of Eden was good for freeing us from our bondage to a false paradise of ignorance. The Illuminati were in resonance with me about their hatred of false religions like the Catholic Church. For a while, I thought the Illuminati were good and fighting evil, but not yet in control of the world. I kept on stumbling over conspiracy theories about 9/11, but at the time it seemed ludicrous that the government would attack their own people. After a while, I finally began to nurture the possibility that 9/11 was caused by the government. So I went to the easiest and quickest source of information on the subject, Amazon book reviews. Again, my stomach sank as I saw 4.5-star reviews for almost all of the 9/11 conspiracy theorist books. I finally began to investigate that. Soon after, it became real to me who caused 9/11. The Illuminati ruled the world, and they were evil. I didn't even tell my family that winter break. I did not want to make the horrors of this world real to them yet. I started following down a dark path of searching for the answer of who controlled the Illuminati. For a long time, I thought that evil reptilians ruled the world. Throughout this time, I was also studying the occult in the Book of the Law, trying desperately to unravel the mysteries of the everything I knew to exist. I was still an atheist at my core, though. I started doing lots of psychedelics with Eddie, Zoe, Duran, Nick, and Nate, following the direction from the Book of the Law to do strange drugs. I once tried to explain to them that the lava lamp was an anagram of the universe. A very funny occurrence. It's this point in his story that he begins to go into extreme detail about which drugs he did, how much of each one, and where it led him. Well, spoiler alert, it led him to making all of this, the Freedom World Alliance, and something else which he further describes here. I was ecstatic to know these secrets finally, but I know that the Illuminati know it as well. They are the secret rulers of this earth. I laid back, closed my eyes, and saw pure white. Then I felt as if my spirit was being pulled towards my spinal cord. I could not face annihilation. At that moment, I felt I had things that I needed to complete, like my movie script, so I sat up saying no, opened my eyes, and forced myself back into this world. I felt a sense of horror as I realized that I just denied myself perfect omniscience instead of being in an animal like a lowly angel. After a couple hours, I came down a little and wanted to get up again, so I took a whole bunch of DPT. I laid back and saw matrixy symbols pass from the right to the left before my eyes. Each symbol had a definite meaning, but it was completely analog. It existed in a field of symbols that formed the alien supreme computer that was sustaining this universe. They were all possible shapes and colors. These symbols passed for a couple of hours. As my trip wore off, I began to forget the details of the Matrix, but I still retained the fact that we are living in an alien hive. Since then, I have been refining my own proof to match the one they revealed to me. Here it is, Supreme Matrix Theory Abstract. He then links a whole other website for that theory, and as you guessed, it is all completely insane. But those parts, they seemed kind of lucid, which very quickly comes to an abrupt end when the next section begins with Harry Potter or Barely Sober. 'Cause I'm so smart, betrayers take 3 years to figure out how to press buttons on their UC to produce what I thought should be nanites replicated everywhere back in 2009 to fix global warming. Obviously, it's no surprise that this person is in this mental state, considering he did take a massive amount of drugs and is most likely battling some sort of mental illness on top of that. But it is scary to consider how that headspace could put him in a position where he acts on these dangerous and impulsive thoughts, and at times, the violent feelings, because he clearly has desires to behave in ways that are just disgusting. Not only the section mentioned earlier on his frustration towards laws that are there to protect people that are under the age of 18, but there's one website I came across that looks different from the rest. Layer Girls. At first, it doesn't seem that crazy. It actually looks much more normal than what we've seen so far. It's a huge list of links to random images, at least at first glance. But the more I click through these, and by the way, there is thousands of these, the more concerned I get. The common denominator among all of them is that it's 99% photos of women, sometimes normal pictures, and sometimes more explicit. Many are of adult women though, and it's not totally odd to be an adult man looking at adult content of women, so that's not totally out of the ordinary, but it doesn't stop there. There's multiple photos that, although they aren't explicit or outwardly gross, they're incredibly sketchy and leave a very unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach, like the multiple photos of children in kids' Halloween costumes, or the edit of a young Jeanette McCurdy, where he or someone else edited a photo of her so it looks more explicit. A photo of her as a teenager. All of this plus the content that's in the hundreds of websites he's created do not look good. In fact, it looks horrific. On one Reddit comment about the web ring, a user comments, "Just your ordinary internet mental illness." But is it really so ordinary? Mental illness may be something many people struggle with, and there may be other people that form their thoughts in ways that are equally as incoherent, but this goes beyond that. These websites give an idea of his desires, what he's interested in, and what he believes. It also points to someone so far removed from reality that it's unclear what they're capable of or what their intentions truly are. Free World Alliance and the other websites may point to a hazardously unstable person who's hiding in plain sight. Allah may be more than a 30-something-year-old who hasn't left his basement in months. He may be more than the average incel. He could be dangerous. But these sites have been up for a while. The first snapshot of it that's archived online is from September 24th, 2013, where it looks different, but it's most certainly still Allah. Over 10 years of uploading every thought, no matter how disturbing, obscene, or concerning it might be. So far, it doesn't seem like any of it has left the safety of the internet. Only time will tell if Free World Alliance makes its way off a computer and into the real world. Texas Department of Criminal Justice. Many of us wonder what our last words will be, who they'll be to, if they'll be meaningful, or if they won't matter at all. It's a daunting thing to face. Someday we'll utter our last breath, and we'll have no idea what those final sentences will be, or if anyone will remember them. This goes for anyone. We're all alike in that way. Well, almost everyone. For the people in prison who are awaiting their turn on death row, they have a whole other set of problems. Not only do they know when they're going to die, but they also have the added pressure of that huge question. What will my last words be? Everyone wants to say something profound before they take one last look at another human being, before they eat their last meal, or before they feel the last little bit of air. These last thoughts, the last words, and sometimes the last cries for help all have a place to live forever on the Texas Department of Criminal Justice's website. Here they've listed 600 last statements of inmates who were on death row in the state of Texas. Scrolling through the list, it's like walking around a cemetery. Masses and masses of people who all lived out their final moments in such similar ways. Though their lives each took different paths, and the reason for their incarceration was different for everyone, this one thing remained the same. They knew exactly when their last moment will be. They knew they had one last chance to say anything they wanted or anything they needed to, like Sean Derek O'Brien. In June of 1993, Sean and 5 other members of the Black and White Gang kidnapped and murdered 2 teenage girls. The crime was brutal and horrific. These 2 girls, Jennifer Ertman and Elizabeth Pena, were only 15 and 16 years old when they were attacked in such gruesome ways. It's understandable that the family's victims were enraged and inconsolable. Their precious babies had been ripped away from them. Both girls' fathers had this to say about Sean, his friends, and their upcoming sentence. I hope the son of a bitch rots in hell. He deserves it. It doesn't make me happy, but this is the punishment he was given, and it's justifiable. I kind of feel numb in a way, knowing that I've been waiting for so long for this day to come. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. On the fateful day that Elizabeth's dad was counting down the days to, Sean had this to get off his chest. I do. I'm so sorry. I have always been sorry. It is the worst mistake that I ever made in my whole life, not because I am here, but because of what I did and I hurt a lot of people. You and my family. I'm sorry. I have always been sorry. I am sorry. You look after each other. I love you all. Be there for one another. All right, but I am sorry. Very sorry. I love you too. All right. It doesn't take away the heaviness of what he did to those 2 innocent girls. No. In fact, it just makes it heavier. What he did was inexcusable. But reading through the last thoughts that ran through his head as he faced his death is still jarring. And he's not alone in feeling guilt, remorse, and shame. There's so many of these last statements that are filled with the same emotions, like Humberto Leal's last statement, which reads as follows: I'm sorry for everything that I've done. I've hurt a lot of people. For years, I've never thought that I deserved any type of forgiveness. Lord Jesus Christ in my life, I know He has forgiven me. I have accepted His forgiveness. I have accepted everything. Let this be final and be done. I take the full blame for this. I am sorry, and forgive me. I am truly sorry. I ask for forgiveness. Life goes on, and it surely does. I'm sorry for the victim's family for what I did. May they forgive me. I don't know if you believe me. Life goes on. I am sure it does. To the man to the right of me, I ask for forgiveness for you. Life goes on. It surely does. I ask for forgiveness. I am truly sorry. That is all. Let's get this show on the road. One more thing. Viva Mexico. Viva Mexico. And Anthony Allen Shores. I'd like to take a moment to say I'm sorry. No amount of words could ever undo what I've done. To the family of my victims, I wish I could undo that past. It is what it is. God bless all of you. I will die with a clear conscience. I made my peace. There is no others. I would like to wish a happy birthday to Barbara Carroll. Today is her birthday. I would like to especially thank those that have helped me. You know who you are. God bless everybody until we meet again. I'm ready, Warden. But then I take a look at the other part of the website on what these inmates did and which crimes they committed. Humberto Leal was convicted on May 21st, 1994 of the abduction and murder of a 16-year-old girl in San Antonio. Not only did he kidnap and assault this poor girl, but the details are sickening. Humberto used a piece of lumber and a 35-pound chunk of asphalt to hurt her in ways that are just beyond gruesome. Now for Anthony Allen Shore, his case is no better. In some ways, it's even worse. On September 26, 1986, Anthony kidnapped a 15-year-old girl named Lori Tremblay, who was walking home from school when she was taken. He attempted to assault her and then followed that with strangulation until she sadly passed away. If that doesn't sound brutal enough, Anthony continued to basically do the same thing to 4 other girls, one of them being just 9 years old, all with strangulation. In fact, after Laura, he began to use a tourniquet with either a toothbrush or bamboo stick to tighten it. Why? Because in his words, I hurt my finger while murdering Tremblay. This granted him the legacy of the tourniquet killer. A legacy that ended with the words, God bless everybody, until we meet again. I'm ready, Warden. I don't know what's more disturbing. Reading someone's last words, or knowing that those words were uttered by someone so evil, so despicable, so sinister, that they leave the world with a clean conscience after committing such monstrous and heinous crimes. But these delusional and, quite honestly, full of apologies and remorseful statements are not unique to Humberto and Anthony. Hundreds of them all sound the same. And each time, I click on what they did to be there in the first place, and more often than not, it's something so atrocious, it makes my stomach turn. It's not everyone, though. There are others throughout the site that are different, less remorseful, but more so angry, and in some ways, even more haunting. Such as with the case Douglas Feldman. Douglas was arrested on September 22nd, 1999, after he had been cut off by a driver of an 18-wheeler. And instead of going about his day, he proceeded to pull up next to the truck and shoot him. 46 minutes passed after that incident, and Douglas had yet to calm down. He was still enraged, and now that the truck driver was gone, he had nowhere else to put all of his anger. At the same time, Nicholas Valquez, another truck driver, was at a gas station filling up his tank, truly just minding his own business, living his life as normal. I don't know if it was the fact that he was a truck driver or it was just the first person he saw when he pulled into the station, but Douglas decided in his blinding rage that he was to shoot Nicholas as well. Clearly, Douglas is unwell, because all of this wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing he did, caused by such an immense road rage that he couldn't contain himself. This was who Douglas was. After the fact, he wrote 81 letters to a former girlfriend, and in one of them he says, "It feels wonderful to cause their death and to watch their pain. God forbid I ever had my finger on the button to launch a nuclear explosive device, because I guarantee that I would wipe as many of these bastards off the face of the planet as I'm able." But this insanity did not result in a ridiculous apology and asking for forgiveness. No. Douglas leaned further into his craziness when asked to give a last statement. He says, "I hereby declare Robert Stephen Everett and Nicholas Valaquez guilty of crimes against me, Douglas Allen Feldman. Either by fact or by proxy, I find them both guilty. I hereby sentence both of them to death, which I carried out in August 1998. As of that time, the state of Texas has been holding me illegally in confinement and by force for 15 years. I hereby protest my pending execution and demand immediate relief." After his statement, and as he awaited his fate, his energy was incredibly nervous. His feet twitched under the sheet. He seemed to flinch as the drug entered his system, and then nothing. He finished his life without even a single trace of regret for the harm that he had caused. No guilt, only a fantasy that actually, the people he murdered in cold blood had done him wrong. And that in the next 60 seconds, the warden would stop the whole thing and let him free. Of course, he was wrong. Most of these inmates are. Most have done horrible things. And while it can be argued whether death is really the right thing to do, it's not like they deserve a happy and peaceful life free of any consequence. But that's most. Because of course the judicial system is flawed, and there are statements that really make me question if it has failed some of these inmates in such a tragic and irreversible way. This statement from Cameron Todd Williamham says, "Yeah, the only statement I want to make is that I'm an innocent man, convicted of a crime I did not commit. I've been persecuted for 12 years for something I did not do. From God's dust I came, and to dust I will return. So the earth shall become my throne. I gotta go. Road Dogg. I love you, Gabby." And another one from Gary Graham. "I would like to say that I did not kill Bobby Lambert, that I'm an innocent black man that is being murdered. This is a lynching that is happening in America tonight. There's overwhelming and compelling evidence of my defense that has never been heard in any court of America. What is happening here is an outrage for any civilized country to anybody anywhere to look at what's happening here is wrong." But then there's the last statement of Terry Edwards. This one stood out for some reason, but it's short and chilling. "Yes, I made peace with God. I hope y'all make peace with this." That last sentence is filled with contempt. It's bleeding with frustration at the way his life is being handled, the way it's being ended, with no way for him to prevent it. He hopes the people watching this feel ashamed, guilty. He hopes they repent. Because Terry claimed, until the day he died, that he did not do what put him on death row. What's in his file is that he and his cousin robbed a restaurant and murdered 2 employees in the process, and Terry was the one that pulled the trigger. But according to Terry, what's on record is not what happened. He never admitted to being the gunman and insisted his cousin was behind it. His cousin, who did have a history of violent crime, something that Terry did not. That wasn't his only argument, though. The problem with the conviction began when the first forensic analysis came back with no evidence that suggested Terry had gunpowder residue on his hand. But with a further cross-examination, the analyst pretty much changed her mind. She said that one chemical was found that could have been from the gun, and Terry probably wiped away the other 2 or 3 elements that are usually found in a case like this, which was looked into by a former FBI agent who called bullshit. He said that made no sense scientifically, that there was no way Terry could have wiped away only 1 or 2 of the particles that would have proven him guilty. Besides that, the entire case was sketchy. The defense attorney had been involved in 3 other cases where the defendants were exonerated due to misconduct, including cases from the same forensic analyst that was handling Terry's case. These people were not reliable or competent at their job, clearly. The even more pressing problem in Terry's mind was that his jury had been made up of all white people, creating racial discrimination. All of this combined, he wanted a stay of execution. He wanted the court to properly investigate this because he knew that he was innocent of the murder that would put him in that seat. But his cries and pleas were denied. Just 1 week before the execution, the attorney's office blocked him with any resources that were created for people in cases where the validity was questioned. And on January 26, 2017, the state of Texas carried out his capital punishment, leaving him no final chance at rectifying what he had done. None of these people listed on this website had any second chances. And when you do things like hurt children, murder your own family, or brutally assault someone, you don't really deserve one. But the stories like Terry's are genuinely heartbreaking. Even in the case that he had done it, that he had murdered those 2 people, there has to be the room for argument that maybe death doesn't have to be the only option. He wasn't a cold-blooded maniac like Douglas Feldman and Anthony Shore. Maybe it was a mistake, brought about by pressure from his cousin, something that he'll feel incredibly remorseful about the rest of his life. But that's impossible when it was cut short without even a second thought. Now his picture, his statement, and a final date will be listed forever on the Department of Criminal Justice's website, alongside the worst of the worst, true murderers, and evil monsters. They all died in the same chair, and they'll live forever on the same dark corner of the internet.